So today we are in the pond room, as that's what we call it. This is where we breed all of our Neocaridina shrimp. I believe there's like 60 IBC totes in here. They're 200 gallons a piece because we cut them down. And this is where we keep and breed Neocaridina shrimp. So that is what we're talking about today. I'm going to give you guys some tips. We're going to go through some things that we do here that maybe is new for you guys. Hopefully you can pick up on something. And if you guys have any questions about how we do things here, drop a comment down below. We'll be happy to answer those for you. So with that being said, let's get into today's video. What is going on, shrimp keepers? If you guys don't know me, I'm Rob with flipaquatics.com, and I am the owner of Flipaquatics. And today I want to talk to you about this room. So this room is one that I kind of envisioned for a while. It took a while to kind of pull it off, and we've just been doing some crazy things. But Neocaridina is like where my hobby started, so it means a lot to me. And so I kind of just want to share some tips about things that we do here that maybe can make you successful, but also kind of just sharing with you our system and how we do things so that maybe you guys can pick some pieces up from that. And so anyway, we have these IBC totes, and basically how all these operate is we just use a standard sponge filter in every one of these tanks. Very simple filtration. We would use a mat filter, but literally, like, you can't get a mat. Well, I mean, you probably could get a mat filter this big, but like it would be too silly. So we don't do that. So we just do normal sponge filters. And then how we actually do water change on this. So I'll actually show you. So this is what I recommend. Now, if you only have one aquarium, it's easy to take, 10 gallons of water out, fill it back up with 10 gallons, limit the amount of water changes you're doing. For just reference, what I recommend is a water change every 2 weeks, 10%, 20%, nothing too crazy, nice and slow, so you're not doing big fluctuations. So our way of preventing fluctuations here and also limiting the amount of labor that goes into it is we have an overflow. So right here, you got just a standard sponge overflow that actually overflows the drain. The sponge prevents the shrimp from getting into the drain. And then we literally just turn this little valve on and we just do a nice slow trickle like that. We'll let this run for 3 or 4 hours. It's slow enough that it won't interfere with the water parameters. It's a flow through system, so it's not getting as much of a water change. So it's a little bit of a waste when it comes to water, but this really simplifies it for us. And this is above the water line, so this will never overflow out. And that's how we thought of doing a water change real simple. Now, if you guys are at home and you're thinking of like, how can you do this on a smaller scale? They sell pressure pumps that you can actually use, that when you turn on the line, the pressure pump kicks on, and you can actually remineralize your water ahead of time, have totes of water, and do something very similar to this. But I'll actually take you over and show you like our filtration system and kind of how it works and how we're getting water to this step. So here's a couple of things that we have that are like super high scale, but you could do much lower scale than this at like a hobbyist level. But this is what I'm referring to when I'm talking about a pressure pump. So this is just a standard pressure pump. So what it is water can just come from any source. It doesn't have to have any pressure to it. It can literally just be gravity fed. And then whenever a valve is turned on from this point and it feels the pressure go down, this pump will kick on and that will make sure it keeps a constant flow. So a lot of houses rely on pressure pumps to keep the pressure high. So like if you have well water, you most likely have a pressure pump. And so they're super good, but we are using tap water. And so there's a couple of things with tap water. One, it generally comes in pretty cold, and in the summer it comes in good, but in the winter it's frigid. So we have just an electric instant hot water tank, and so we have it set to 71 degrees. If you use gas, it doesn't give you the control of the temperature very well. It's like, you can either set it to like 70 degrees, 90 degrees, 120 degrees, 150 degrees, like something like that. So it's this one being electrical, it allows you to set an exact temperature. So we have it set to 71 degrees. That's perfect for what we're using it for. And then we don't have to worry about mixing water, which we do in the other building. Whole different story. We won't get into that. These are the two things that I'm going to recommend for everyone that's using tap water. Carbon tower. And you can use this on your entire house. They're not very expensive. I want to say like each one of these is maybe like $400 or $500. And it's going to make your tap water so much better. It's even going to make your well water so much better. So we have a regular coconut carbon, very basic, you can get it anywhere. And then we have a specialty carbon that removes ammonia. So this carbon is our second stage. So it goes to the coconut carbon, and then it goes to this one next, and that removes the ammonia. So it's just a higher class carbon, for lack of better word. And so you can find that on Amazon. You just look up like carbon that removes ammonia, and you're going to come up with this result. So I definitely highly recommend this. But if you could do RO water, you're going to be way better off. Just at our scale, there's no way that we could do it. But that is what I would recommend if you only have 1 or 2 tanks. And if you do have that, there's really easy ways to do remineralizing water, and I'll show you that next. So if you guys want to go the different route, the easier route, probably the safer route, RO water or distilled water, you can get it at your grocery store. It's fairly cheap. It's like less than $1 per gallon. And if you only have a couple tanks, it makes a lot of sense. So here's what I recommend: 5-gallon bucket. And then for neocaridina, there's only 2 products you need. Now, this is the result of a lot of research, a lot of planning, a lot of time. This is our own brand. It's called Shrimple, and it's Shrimply Cage, Shrimply GH. So you're going to need GH and Cage to remineralize your water for neocaridina. Now, what we recommend is a GH of 2 to a Cage of 1, so 2-to-1 ratio. And what we aim for is at least a GH of 10 and a KH of 5. So you can do more than that. You can probably go up to 16 and 8. But how you dose these, and these are super accurate. So 1 pump per 10 gallons will increase it by 1 degree. So if you're remineralizing a 5-gallon bucket of distilled water, all you have to do is do 4 pumps of GH will give you 8 because it's half of the 10. So 4 pumps of this and 2 pumps of this, and you're ready to go. It's that simple. There's no other testing, nothing else that you need to do, and you're ready to go. And I guarantee you're gonna have the perfect water for neocaridina shrimp every single time. So if you want to simplify your life, get some Shrimple for your tank. So when you look at this pond, obviously it looks different than the other ones. And so this one has a much like darker like tea color almost, and that's because there's tannins in the water. And so tannins is something we always utilize for shrimp, especially when they're going through a treatment, because tannins will add antioxidants in the water. And so that helps them heal naturally. And so here's kind of what we do. Right here we have a tea bag, and we put about, I want to say 50-ish alder cones in a 200-gallon tank. And then we just put the tea bag in there, and then we just let the tannins just naturally pollute into the aquarium. And then that really helps us with getting the shrimp healthy. So if you're ever having issues in your tank and the shrimp just aren't doing good, or maybe you just brought them in, like you just got them, it's always good to have tannins in your tank, at least in the first month, 2 months, just to kind of help them get through that initial stage of like stabilizing themselves in a new aquarium. And so tannins is a huge part to be successful with shrimp tanks. DJM's over here making me crack up and coughing. But anyway, the next big thing that I want to show you guys is what we feed. So I think this is a huge part of our success. And it just shows that like you don't have to feed anything like super crazy, buy like these super premium foods. So if you see right here in powdered down mix, Northfin kelp wafers, Northfin Bug Pro, Northfin Community, and Northfin Veggie. And what we do is we put all this into a coffee grinder, grind it down as fine as we can get it, and that's what we feed. And what ends up happening is you end up having like big chunks, and then you have smaller chunks, and then you have powder. The powder is really good for the babies. The big chunks are really good for the adults. It already grinds it down so that it's all over your tank. And what that does is it makes it so there's less aggression when it comes to feeding time, because every shrimp can just grab a piece and go. They're not fighting over one chunk of food. All these foods are pretty inexpensive. They're not super expensive. So you can get these, you can grind them up yourself. You could feed them individually, like, hey, like this day I'm feeding Northfin Veggie, this day I'm feeding Northfin Kelp, so on and so forth. The only thing with that is like, at that point, you don't know exactly how much to feed. Like each granule is a different size. So like, how do you figure that out? And so for us, it's just easier just to grind it up, and then you get the nice powder. But this is something that we feed 5 days a week. We take a break Saturday, Sunday, because we're trying to wean them off of food for shipping on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So that way they're not pooping in the bag. But we do feed this 5 days a week, and it just shows that you don't need like a super shrimp specific food to feed your shrimp, because here we are feeding thousands and thousands of neocaridina shrimp, and they're all doing great on a very basic food. It's a great food, but it's made for fish. It's not like that super expensive 30 grams for $20 shrimp food that you can get. So big piece of advice for you guys: take it or leave it, whatever you want to do. Okay, so the next thing is Just so you guys know, where this room is located, it's in the basement, and this room always stays cold. So like, I don't know, Lex, how cold is this room, would you say right now? Like in the 60s? Low 60s. So like in the winter, our poor Lexi's the leader of our bagging team, and just catching on these ponds, they're frigid in the winter. Like they're literally so cold. So I would imagine they get down to like low 60s, high 50s, and they shrimp do fine. So basically what I'm saying is heaters, never a good idea with shrimp. I know I always preach that, but I want to preach it again, is like, don't use a heater in your shrimp tank. And it barely ever makes sense. And if you do it, you need to do it in a very strategic way, have very high-tech equipment to make sure your heater doesn't malfunction, make sure it doesn't have these huge swings and parameters. But like literally all these are sitting on a concrete slab, which is cold. And I guarantee the warmest these get all year long is maybe 68 degrees. And we have a lot of these are breeding. I can actually take you around and show you some of these that are breeding after this and just show you kind of what is going on in all these ponds. But they don't need high temperature. And I always preach this too, is like, if you do keep these at like, let's say you keep these at 78 degrees, which you could do, it's super risky because it's like driving a car 120 miles an hour. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Things are going fast. You're laughing. You're having a good time. But all of a sudden you hit a pothole that you didn't expect, and it's catastrophic. Like you wreck the car and like pieces everywhere. You might die. Whereas like if you're going 20 miles an hour, which is the equivalent of keeping your tank at 66 degrees, you hit a pothole and you're like, oh, well, that wasn't that bad. Or you're going slow enough that you can avoid the pothole. And so always lower temperatures, specifically for Neocaridina, specifically for Caridina, is going to just make your life so much easier. But if you want to go super fast and have crazy breeding, you could try a warmer. I'm just warning you that you might hit that speed bump, that pothole, and things will go south super fast. But let me take you through, I'll show you some of the tanks that are breeding. This is one of our Fantasy Blue tanks, which, just so you guys know, Fantasy Blues are literally my favorite Neocaridina shrimp because you just can't beat the pretty blue color in anything. Like, blue shrimp are always my favorite. It doesn't matter, Caridina, Neocaridina. But these ones are breeding, and the reason that you can tell that this tank has been set up for a long time is all the sides and the bottom are just algae covered. And there's literally babies on every surface of this tank. So the only thing that we could do better with this tank if we really want to capitalize on the breeding aspect is do a substrate, because right now we don't have a substrate. And the reason that substrate helps is there's a lot of good biological filtration that can live in the substrate that we're not capitalizing on right now. But for us at this scale, using a substrate makes it much harder to catch. It also makes it really hard to siphon the tank because like literally you're trying to siphon from the bottom. There's really nowhere you can drain it because it's not elevated off the ground. And so there's a couple things that could go wrong if we use substrates. That's why we don't use it. And the other thing is it makes it really easy to call when you have a white background because then you know how the shrimp are going to look. But literally we have our snails in here, we have our tannins in here, we have our filter, and then there's literally just little babies all along every single surface in this whole aquarium. And this is just one, and there's like 60 tanks in here. I would say we're maybe utilizing 10 of them for actually breeding, but this just gives you a really good example of what a breeding tank would look like and how we're doing it, and that is keeping these guys at, you know, the 68 to 62 degrees year round, and they're still able to breed. At the end of the day, we always preach this too, patience is key. So if you're not in a hurry, it just takes time. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Let me know questions, comments down below, because we do want to give you guys information that you want. So I know there's a lot of stuff in here that I probably take for granted, and maybe you guys are like, hey, how does this work, and how do you do this, and so on and so forth. So ask as many questions as you can. DJM will make sure we get those questions answered in the next video. And so I hope you guys did learn something today. At least you saw how we do things here. And yeah, drop those questions. But you guys make it a great rest of your week. Thanks again for tuning in. As always, God bless. We'll catch you on the flip side.